What is going on, Bunker? Welcome to another edition of Bunker Office Hours, brought to you by the team at Bunker Labs, a national network of veteran and military spouse entrepreneurs dedicated to helping the military connected community start and grow their businesses. I'm your host today, the one and only Iron Mike Stedman, joined by my co-host, Amy Morrison, and our special guest for the day, Kimberly June from Blanchard House. What's going on, y'all?
Hi, Mike. How are you doing?
You're a
Hi,
repeat.
Amy.
I haven't had you on office hours yet, but we did have an amazing podcast a few months ago with you and your co-founder from Roomy Spice, and
Right.
got a lot of positive feedback on the episode. So I
I'm so
appreciate you
glad.
making time.
Absolutely. Anything for you guys. Anything for Bunker Labs. I love the military veteran community. And
It is.
everyone out there who's like doing startups and hustling, like you guys are my people.
I try to tell people, man, the water's warm. Come on in.
Yeah.
If you're on the outside looking in and you're a veteran entrepreneur, you're missing out, man. Get plugged into this ecosystem between Bunker Labs. We got the military veteran startup conference now. There's just a lot of positive energy going. And, that's why it's important for us to have a voice in this ecosystem so we can pull more people into it. So
Totally.
before we chop it up with Kimberly, I'm going to pass it over to Amy to talk about events that are taking place in the bunker.
Thanks, Mike. So this week we've got veterans and residents applications are open for the July cohort, and you can check that out at bunkerlabs.org/veterans in residence. And then we've also got applications opening soon on March 21st for the USAA 100th anniversary pitch contest in DC. That is on the website now. You can fill out the interest form or just wait till March 21st. March 21st and fill out the app then. And then finally, we've got Breaking Barriers in Entrepreneurship Workshop Series. Applications are open until April 3rd for that one. And then that one starts in May.
Loving it. Shelby says you're going to be the masterclass speaker for the VIR in April.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm excited.
Yeah, she's like, I just found that out on a live stream. But in all seriousness, listen, these cohort-based programs we've got now between the veterans and residents, right? We've got our workshop series. These are all programs that are available to the community, free of cost, literally free, right? So all you have to do is sign up and apply, go through our screening process and application. And for those of you tuning in that have already participated or are active in these programs, help spread the word. It costs nothing. It takes nothing. If you see a post about upcoming VR applications, start tagging entrepreneurs. The same thing for the workshop series. This is how this works, right? We are all taking an active role in growing and supporting this community. And I'll tell you, I interviewed a veteran yesterday on the transition, and he brought up this interesting point, Kim. A lot of veterans are struggling having their value recognized in the civilian world as they transition. So like if you're a West Point grad, well, maybe not West Point grad because we don't speak too highly of you guys, but if you're a Marine, and you say, I was a machine gunner in the Marine Corps, and you start transitioning out, it's really hard for civilians that don't have a interaction with the military to understand what skill sets you bring. But a veteran that's owning a business, right, especially one that's another Marine, he can recognize and spot talent right off the bat. So that's the power of us growing this ecosystem so we can hire each other, and limit all the turmoil that comes with the transition process. So enough of that. I'm just, I just feel like it was on my heart, on my mind to share that's why these programs are so important. And that's why we need more veteran entrepreneurs and military spouses winning.
I totally agree. I think the transition can be really challenging for some people, and it takes two to tango, right? So like I feel like the civilians who don't understand need to take that step and ask the questions, but the veterans also need to be offering like explanations or like trying to understand, what they don't know and like telling them. And oftentimes I think military people don't want to boast about themselves, but in the civilian world, you need to tell people because they don't know. So don't be shy about telling people the amazing things that you've done and accomplished in the military.
Speaking of amazing things, right? When I came into the Bunker Lab ecosystem, you were one of the entrepreneurs I looked up to. I saw what you were doing with Roomy Spice, and now you're a serial entrepreneur. You just launched this new venture we're going to talk about today, Blanchard House, and I'm sure you're probably doing some advising here and there. So man, it's great to have you on, again.
Oh, thanks, Mike. It's great to see you again.
So bring us up to speed on what you're working on currently.
Yeah, so my company is called BlanchardHouse, and it's a podcast company. We do narrative style podcasts. It's long form journalism. They're 6-part miniseries, so it's not your typical podcast. It's we have these former BBC and Economist radio producers, highly trained, highly skilled at making these narrative style podcasts, and it takes us a couple months to make one, and we sell it to these platforms like Apple, Spotify, Audible. And then they get released. And so we are not a talk show podcast. We don't really do true crime. Those two, I think, are like the most popular genres that we have in podcasting today. And they're great. It's just that a lot of people do them. And the way that we're trying to differentiate ourselves in the market is by doing something different. And this different part is this like narrative style, well-researched journalism. And we do nonfiction too.
So as a fellow podcaster, narrative podcasting is hard and it takes a lot of work. And then you've got to grow the shows and do everything. So kudos to you for stepping in that hot seat and launching a venture in the space. Now, when we talk about entrepreneurship, we always talk about a problem, right? That's where most ventures arise. It's like an entrepreneur recognizes a problem and then decides to solve it using capitalism and building something. Where did you come up with the idea for Blanchard House? What was the problem that you all were solving?
It's, there's several ways, right? One, you have to have a problem, like you said. And then there's other parts where like you have to meet the right people who can solve that problem. So the first thing for me was actually realizing that there was this huge discrepancy in talent and pay between the UK and the US. So these UK producers who work for the BBC and The Economist are sort of like at the ceiling of their career trajectories because they can't go above the BBC and The Economist, and it sort of kind of stalls right there. But they had so much more potential to make amazing shows. And podcasting is an exploding industry. There's been so much M&A, so mergers and acquisitions, like when let's say Wondery gets bought by Amazon, that would be an M&A, mergers and acquisitions. So there's so much of it happening just left and right. Spotify's been buying stuff every month, these little podcast publishing companies or podcast advertising revenue companies. And so we thought we'd get in there because really what the problem is that there aren't enough narrative style podcast shows, and they don't do it quickly and they don't do it very well. So a lot of podcasting is sort of like a little talk show stuff, and that's great. People get into it. It's a low barrier to entry market is like talk shows. But higher up, it's much harder to get to, as Mike said. And people really want these shows, and it's showing because we're not having any trouble finding buyers for our shows. It's just making sure that we make the content. And so it's like this engine that we have, and we're filling that gap. So yeah, that's basically the problem that we're solving. And we're basically assets for these larger buyers to be able to sell parts of those assets to advertising for brands.
Got it. So like a studio, so helping create content for them. So you are a serial entrepreneur at this point. You've already built a successful business. How has your experience with Rumi Spice transitioned into this new venture?
That's a great question. Definitely the skills that you learn as an entrepreneur stay with you, throughout your journey, whether you're working for yourself or you're working for another company. I think the main thing is like being scrappy and figuring out how to pivot. At Rumi Spice, we started off with so many different versions of our packaging, and we didn't know, let's say, like which channel was the best one to sell into. And so some of the very basic things that you do as an entrepreneur is you do the numbers, right? So it's like, well, how much am I selling to online channel? How much is it when I sell to restaurants? And each of those channels has a different product they like, so the restaurants at Rumi Spice wanted 1 ounce packages, whereas the retail would want like 10 grams, 5 grams, which is a lot less. So there's like different packaging, different pricing. and along with those, like different costs for each. And then, so I do the costs, I figure out what the price points are for each of these channels. I like try to sell, see what the take is, see if people are actually interested, how much they reorder, what's the bounce rate. And then, meaning like, if they end up not buying from us again, we always want them to keep buying. And then just how big the market is, like, is how many restaurants out there actually buy saffron? How many people buy saffron online? So these are questions that we have to continually ask ourselves and gather data about. And it's the same thing with these podcasts, right? So like it's happening a little bit slower because these products are entire podcast series. And so it takes several months to do that. But the question is like, is the content that we're making fitting in with the market? Are people willing to buy this? Why are they buying it, or why are they not buying it? Is it because of the talent that we have on the show, like these presenters, because we brought in these kind of celebrity presenters? Is that the main reason why they're buying it? Or is it because the sound design is really good? Why didn't they buy this one? Is it because it doesn't fit into their current portfolio that they're trying to build for their brand? So these are, again, questions that you're just constantly asking yourself that are really important to basically figure out, am I going in the right direction? Do I need to pivot? Do I need to start figuring out how I can make money, basically?
Getting that market-based feedback. One of the things that I'm always fascinated by entrepreneurs such as yourself is how hard it still is for everybody, because people assume that, oh, I was successful at this venture, now I'm going to launch this one, and it just comes easy. But I see everyone still working hard. 3, 4, 5 ventures later, it's more of just kind of having that pattern recognition and probably being able to recognize like, hey, there may not be a market here. Or in your case, and in my case, we realize like, hey, there's a lot of money moving around in podcasting. There is this demand pull that's taking place. So there is a market opportunity. And me and you talked about this on the podcast interview we did about how important it is to look with the market first lens and say, is there money flowing in this space? If not, chances are you're going to find yourself swimming upstream.
Exactly. And that's kind of maybe the first question that you have to ask. Some people are like, they love their product so much that they're sort of blind to the market. And that's a big mistake that people make all the time. You don't want to do that. So.
Yeah. Now, are you still having fun on this second venture? I mean,
absolutely. I'm always having fun. I think for me, like, just startups in general, it's like, it's so challenging and it's so fun. I actually feel like being deployed, helped me a lot for being, a startup person, because we were in Afghanistan. So I was in the Army. I was a 12 Alpha or 21 Alpha. They switched at some point. So I was an engineer officer. I was a platoon leader. And I remember we were a route clearance platoon. So like we were kind of off on our own. I didn't like my company commander and the rest of the battalion, and everybody was like somewhere else. So we had to figure things out on our own. We had to get resourced on our own. We didn't even have proper maintenance. Like things were broken all the time. Had to find allies. And these are the types of, I think, the skills that you need to learn when you're in these tough situations and you just got to figure out how to survive. That's what veterans are really good at. And that's what each one of you guys who's listening, all of you guys like have those skills. You've got to figure stuff out. You've got to get a mission done. And that's what entrepreneurs do, which is why I think veterans are uniquely positioned to be excellent entrepreneurs.
With that point, we've got people tuning in from all over the country, all over the world. While me and Kim are talking, please feel free to drop some questions into the chat. I mean, she's a serial entrepreneur. She's a beast, y'all. So if you've got questions in your own ventures and want to pick her brain about it, please go ahead and drop that into the chat. So going back to what we were talking about earlier, Kim, is that like so many veterans are struggling transitioning. How do we get them to take that entrepreneurial leap with us and deal and manage with the risk?
Well, I think first, like anything, right? If you're going to have a mission, you're going to do a risk assessment, and you're going to figure out what resources you do have, what you need, what are some possible options, what could go wrong, what are your contingency plans, typical stuff, right? And I think the first thing I want to ask people when they want to do the entrepreneurial journey is like, can you support yourself? That's like really the most important thing. So a lot of people moonlight, so they like work for their regular company in the daytime, and they start doing the research for a startup on the side, like after work and stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that, and that's really great because you got a steady income, and you have some time to do some research, and it's okay. You can kind of put your toe in the water. At the point where you're ready to step off, you've made a whole business plan at this point. You have recruited the right people. Maybe it's just you and one other person, or maybe it's just you. You don't want a huge team at this point, to be honest. You just want maybe max 3 people. You have your business plan, you have your people, you got a plan, you can go do it. One of the biggest pieces of advice that I got when I was stepping off into Roomy Spice for the first time and doing it full time, I was seeing my mentor and I was telling him about some interviews that I was doing for another job, and he was like, "You're doing what? You're trying to you're getting other job offers? So Roomy Spice is just a hobby business." And I was so shocked because he was right. It hit me right in the heart. I was like, man, if I want to help Afghan farmers and I'm trying to make a difference in the world, they deserve every ounce of my energy and my time. It can't be some side business. That doesn't work that way. So he basically told me to get on the highway, burn off the off ramps, and that's what's going to put a fire in your ass and you're going to make it work. And he was right. And that's what I did. I declined any offers and decided to do Roomy Spice full time with my co-founders, and we did it. We made it. We had to make it lift off the ground, or another ways to put it, it's build a plane and flying it at the same time. We had to do it because our lives depended on it. My income depended on it as well. So we had to raise money and that kind of stuff. But it's hard. You got to first figure out, are you able to support yourself? If you've got disability payments, or maybe you got I don't know, your retirement money, that's great. That's a great way to support yourself. Yeah.
Basically, she's saying you got to hustle, y'all. But there is a way to de-risk it, and it's why you got to learn to drive revenue. You got to drive the revenue, because you're going to get up to a certain point and you hit that number, say, hey, this is the number I need in order to feel comfortable, whether it's $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever, and start to reverse engineer the process and say, hey, how much revenue do we need to bring in order for me to be able to take home X amount of money? And you focus on that. And again, I remember when I found Bunker, right? I still had a full-time job. And a lot of my peer group honestly did have full-time jobs. So I would see people like you and be like, how did they do it? How are they doing this full-time? But you start to learn the pattern and realize what successful people are doing and the process it took to get them there.
Exactly.
So if you have questions for Kim and I, go ahead and drop them in the chat. Questions about anything, business model, or Blanchard House, or her journey in general. Oh, we got a question specific to Roomy. When the world changes, i.e. the Taliban, how do you shift?
Yeah, this was one of the major questions that our investors had when we first started out in 2014. And yeah, it happened. It just happened. So fortunately for us, and this is also what I told the investors back then in 2014, what we do is that we are allied with the farmers. So the farmers they're part of our supply chain, right? And they live there. They're part of the fabric of society in Herat. So we're on the western side. It's a bit different than the north or the south or the east. I would say it's a little more stable. It's close to the Iranian border. But since the Taliban have taken over, they've sort of left us alone because saffron is already considered to be a women activity. So, we only hire Afghan women to do the picking of the flowers and the picking of the stigmas from the saffron flowers. And we have 3 processing facilities. We still work with over 300 farmers. We still hire over 4,000 Afghan women every year. And in fact, there's been more interest in Afghanistan from the American market. And so we've got more sales and more revenue. And we're doing great. I'm honestly really pleasantly surprised. I wasn't sure exactly what would happen when the Taliban took over. But we seem to be doing great. Although there's a couple of people who are Hazara, and maybe they've worked for the U.S. government, and they are not in great shape, and they're trying to get out of Afghanistan. And if they have, they've moved to Pakistan. And there's this whole fiasco of trying to, get them humanitarian parole visas and raise money for them. So we're doing that also on the side personally. So it's a bit of a mixed bag.
I appreciate you sharing that. And where my mind went, Kim, was this idea of the flywheel,
Oh, yeah, that's a great point.
With Jim Collins, in the book Good to Great, he talks about, he has a chapter in there, turning the flywheel, et cetera. And what you want to do is you want to have this underlying business architecture that is like recession proof, pandemic proof, et cetera. So the top of your flywheel is, let's say I start a coffee company, and part of our business is we source high quality coffee from around the world, from farmers around the world. It doesn't matter who the regime changes, right? The top of that flywheel still stays the same. And you create this momentum in your business that basically drives innovation, drives growth, et cetera. So really focusing on the underlying architecture of your venture, that's what's going to de-risk it when the world starts to change.
Oh, yeah. You can't de-risk everything completely, but you just do your best and you run with it, and you gotta be flexible when the time comes and figure out ways to overcome and overcome obstacles.
Absolutely. So now we go to one of my favorite parts of office hours, our book recommendations. So Kim, I assume that you are an avid reader. If you're not, it's okay. But do you have any book recommendations or podcast recommendations that come top of mind?
I haven't been reading as many books as I'd like, but one book I've read that I started to read recently is called The Red Daughter, and it's about Joseph Stalin's daughter, Svetlana, and she actually defected to the United States, I think in the 60s, but it details about her life growing up with her father, and then her move to the United States. She was a writer. She died in 2011. So I'm just learning about her life. Another great book that's maybe more like maybe interesting for a good read is actually no, two more. One that I love if you like science fiction is the Three Body Problem Dark Forest series by Cixin Liu. Super great if you like sci-fi. So just Google Three Body Problem. It's sci-fi that's like, it expands across the universe, and it's very big, and it's I don't know how to describe it. It's amazing. I love it. Another one is a book called Debt, which is a bit more academic and technical. I'm finding it hard to slog through, but it's got some great points about how, like, what is debt? What is money? What is the history about over the last 5,000 years? Do we, like, when we talk about when people used to owe each other, or like, how does this relate to slavery also? Like, how did human beings become also part of, like, paying back a debt? How can you trade human lives? It's really interesting how we talk about this, and how it's also related to morality, like why we believe that you should always be paying back your debts. Like, or is this a way that human beings are just held to each other in a society? Is like we all owe each other something, and that's how we like stay together.
I got to check that out. That sounds like an Audible read, though. But
it's more of an Audible.
That. My book recommendation for the week is Founder Brand by Dave Gerhardt. How to turn your story into your competitive advantage. Dave was the chief brand officer at Drift, and worked with a guy named David Cancel over there. And Drift is a billion dollar company. He was CMO at Privy. So he's really identified this framework to amplify a brand story through their founder. And so as a branding and marketing guy, I'm really leaning into a lot of the content that he's been putting out. And when I found out he wrote this book, I checked it out. I'm only like one chapter in, but this is what I'm reading over the next week. So encourage you all to check it out. Like Kim said, like we all don't do as much reading as we would like, but I am getting back to like my 10 pages, my 20 pages, putting the phone down, getting off of social media, and, spending some reading time. Josh Wilden dropped Merging Vets and Players in the chat, and Unbreakable by Jay Glazer. So check those out. And yeah, man, keep sending information to us out here in the bunker community to spread it around. Now, before we head out, Kim, I know you sent some questions over ahead of time of like topics you like to cover. and I realized I butchered it. So I just looked back and I was like, oh, these are topics you want to cover. I missed them.
They were just ideas. Yeah, I can.
But we have veteran entrepreneurs and military spouses tuning in from all over the country, all over the world. Tell us how we can help support your venture, Blanchard House, and what you need from us.
Yeah, well, we currently actually don't even have any podcasts out yet. We've sold 2 of them to 2 platforms, but it's up to them for when they want to release it. If you go on the website, which is on the screen right now, and you sign up for our newsletter, that would be super great. So you can like stay tuned for when we do have podcasts that come out. And we just would love your support, and that's it. And maybe at the time you can rate it positively and that kind of stuff. So yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for the support.
Yeah, so we've got the news. We've got a link to our website in the chat. Head over, sign up for that newsletter. As you come across brand opportunities for Blanchard House, shoot Kim and them a message, tag them. Let's help elevate the brand. And for everyone tuning in, I want to encourage y'all to check out the Transition Podcast. We've been dropping some monster episodes for the last 2 months. We're finally catching our stride. It's Women's History Month this month, and we've got some amazing female entrepreneurs on the platform. I have Rita Hicks from Gotspot dropping on Thursday. Tune into that. So we've got a lot of great content to support you all out there, a lot of inspiring stories. I'd like to acknowledge our virtual event sponsors for the day, MetLife Foundation, and their commitment to supporting veteran and military spouses. So we appreciate you, MetLife Foundation, for making this platform and the transition available. Head over to bunkerlabs.org, get plugged into the ecosystem, sign up. We got programs to take you from idea to invoice, incubate you, and position to grow alongside other founders and CEOs. Until next week, everyone, peace, love, and have a great rest